It's Friday, and you know what that means. It's time for another short term review. And this week, I have the Anbernic RG476H. And after a week of use, I am left wondering, does having one of the best screens on the market justify the price of admission? So let's find out the answer to that question and many more right after this. Hey fam, Swati Tukon Nick here, and thank you for joining me for another video. I want to first and foremost thank you for joining me, as I am a smaller YouTuber and I know you have a lot of options out there, so I want to thank you for taking the time to join my video. And just as a quick recap, in case this is your first review video with me, I want to go over the structure of my reviews. First and foremost, I've got 7 different categories, with each of them rated 0 to 69. And those categories are the unboxing experience, internals, first impressions, ease of use, customizability, controls, and finally value. After that, we'll put them all together and give you an overall score. Then I'll cover the top pros and cons of the device. Finally, I'll consider who should consider it and who should skip it. Now let's get into the first category, the unboxing experience. And as you can see, the device comes in a simple white box with a nice high-res glossy image of the device with a very basic box other than that. Of course, you do get the traditional FCC and made in China gubbins, but that's about it. Other than this corner having the 3 colorways, black, retro gray, and indigo. And as you saw in the intro there, I chose the retro gray because I thought it would really stand out. But not even the back has a sticker with specs or anything like that, so it's super basic. And then if we lift the lid, there we go. Of course, we get the device being protected by a foam pad, so I appreciate that. It is an investment after all. And the device came in this little opaque little bag to protect it. And of course, it was sitting in a tray. Under that tray, we get a manual. And to the right in this box, we have USB-A to USB-C charging cable in case you need one of those. Now, bear in mind, this is a slow charger. So grab a phone charger from 15 years ago, 10 years ago. Don't use anything from the last few years or else it'll charge too fast and either fry your battery or the circuit board. So don't even risk it. Slow charge. And the way you can either do it, if you don't have those wall warts, you can plug it into a USB-A port on your computer, or if your wall adapter itself has like the outlet and then next to it has a USB-A port, you can plug into that and then plug into it via this because it'll slow charge at that rate from the wall. But do not, again, use the one that come with your phone over the last couple of years. So it's plain, but it's functional. So that means that I have to be fair and give it a slightly above average 39. But what's inside the box is just the wrapping. Let's jump into internals to see the real insides. And first and foremost, of course, we have the SoC, which is a Unisoc T820, which if you're not familiar with SoC, which means system on a chip, which means the old school GPU and CPU mixed together to have one unit so everything communicates more quickly. So the T820 has a capable mid-range chip that handles most retro systems and lighter Android games very well. And the GPU incorporated on that SoC is called the ARM Mali G57, which provides solid graphics for PSP and some PS2 and GameCube at native resolutions, but don't expect any heavy upscaling. That said, I did get some basic Wii games going as well, so you can definitely do that for the lighter weight games. Don't expect the big games to go though. Powering that, of course, you need some RAM, so we have 8 gigabytes of LP DDR4X RAM, which gives you plenty of headroom for both Android multitasking as well as demanding emulators without much slowdown as far as what the SoC can handle. Now, the storage inside of this has 128 gigabytes of UFS 2.2 storage, which is more than fast enough internal storage for quick load times and expandable memory if needed via micro SD card. The nice thing is, again, this is more than fast enough for the average person, unless you're trying to emulate something like PS3, which this SoC would not be able to handle in the first place. And the real star of the show is this 4.7 LTPS IPS display with a 1280 by 960 resolution. This gives you great sharp 4:3 content, which of course PS2 and before are all 4:3 content, so it'll all upscale beautifully. Outside of PS3 and PS2 might be a little bit too much for it to be upscaled that much. And of course you do get a refresh rate of 120 Hertz, which makes menus and gameplay feel incredibly smooth and a premium feature in a retro handheld to be sure. As far as connectivity goes, we have Wi-Fi 6 to make sure you get the fastest scraping possible on this device, as well as Bluetooth 5.0. Now, I know you can use your Wi-Fi, of course, for other things, such as WinLater to be able to play your PC games, but I was just kind of joking to scrape as quickly as possible. But it is nice that we have the faster Wi-Fi, so if you do want to take advantage of WinLater or other PC gaming systems, you definitely can. Just bear in mind, most of those systems want to use your internal storage, which is why it's great that we have a micro SD card for your retro game. And of course, the Bluetooth 5.0, you get things like wireless headphones and controllers fully supported as well. So again, gives you great flexibility. If you want to consoleize your device, you're absolutely able to do so. Now, powering this guy, you have a 5,000 milliamp hour battery, which is a large enough capacity that should get you 5 to 6 hours of gameplay, depending on what game you're playing. Obviously, if you're playing PS2 games and you're upscaling as much as you can, you're going to be burning through that battery much quicker than if you're playing NES. So bear that in mind. Your mileage will vary depending on what game you're playing. And of course, as I mentioned, one of the beautiful things about this device is that it has Android 13. So you get a modern, familiar interface with full access to the Google Play Store. So again, if you want Genshin Impact and those types of games, you can absolutely get those from the Google Play Store. Then you have your retro games to be able to play your retro systems without any issues. So is it the most powerful console on the market? No, but it's a great all-arounder. And I have to give the internals an above average 51 out of 69. Now that we know what's under the hood, the real first impression starts the moment you pick it up. So let's talk about that next. So as we dig into first impressions, I have to again call out this retro gray color, because again, I just love the kind of old school vibes that it casts. And then I have to mention also, whenever you first take it out, you notice these chamfered edges versus having flat edges like the top and bottom here. You can see the chamfered edges on the bottom, at least make it nice whenever you're holding on to it, because that's where your fingers are being held. So I appreciate the chamfered edges. Now, it is a plastic that's not gritty by any means, but it is not smudgy, at least from my experience. I've been using it for a week. I haven't had to wipe off any smudges with this retro gray color. So I think that's really awesome. Now, if I had the black, I might have needed to wipe it down, but at least the retro gray doesn't smudge up. So kudos to Anbernic for that. And immediately I feel at home whenever I take it out of the wrapper and I see this D-pad, because this is an SNES style that's nice and quiet. And then the 4 face buttons, again, nice and quiet. A little shiny, a little slippery, but not a deal breaker by any means. And again, much bigger than some other handhelds. So I appreciate that they're not consoleized, but pretty good. And me being a PlayStation guy, I do like having my parallel sticks. So I'm glad I have my parallel sticks down here. And start and select being down here together versus apart up top does seem like a bit of a miss, but it is what it is. And at least, they're relatively quiet buttons with a little clickiness. And the first time you push on the shoulder buttons, you'll hear the clickiness on L1 and R1, but thank goodness the triggers R2 and L2 are nice and quiet. And of course, the screen is absolutely stunning. I had people at my church consider it to be an OLED at first before I told them it's actually an IPS display. But again, that's just giving credence to the fact that it is a really good display. So it more than makes a great first impression in my book. So I have to give it a 57 out of 69. But how easy is it to actually use day to day? Let's find out. Let's take a look at ease of use next. And the nice thing is, again, you get familiarity with Android. If you've used an Android phone in the last 10 years, you're going to feel right at home. And if you've used an iPhone in the last 2 or 3 years, you're going to feel right at home, because those operating systems have been kind of merging together as far as the way they look and operate. So a lot of the similarities are there, such as swiping up from the bottom to multitask and whatnot. Now, the other caveat, of course, is because it's Android, it's innately going to be a little bit more difficult than those Linux-based plug-and-play devices. Why? Because with Android, you're going to need to plug in your micro SD card or transfer over your games onto the internal storage. You'll need to know how to be able to map them to specific emulators or to specific backends or specific front ends. For example, Anbernic has their own front end. You still need to set it up. And it does come with RetroArch. But again, you have to set up RetroArch. It does not come with ESDE, which is Emulation Station Desktop Edition. It doesn't have it. But you can download it, of course, because it's Android. But the point is that everything, you load it, and then you're going to have to do extra steps before you can play a game. Whereas a Linux device, you turn it on, and it's already been formatted, ready to go for you. All of the operating system is set up, so you just quick, boop, 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 and you're playing a game. That's not going to be the case. This is going to take some time. which is why some in the hobby of retro handhelds say that for them, one of their favorite things is to get a new retro handheld is for that setup process. Because you could do a very basic setup process and be up and playing in 5 minutes. If you're using Anbernic's own front end, absolutely. If you're trying to use RetroArch, if you're trying to use ESDE or Beacon, you're going to have to download those as a secondary ones. And you're going to have to tinker with them to load up your ROMs and be able to read those and then associate them to the proper emulators. So there's a bit more work involved. But again, that's why some people like the couple of hours to set up a device. If they want to, they go full tilt and get that thing going after a few hours. But they're doing a lot more than you would be if you're new to the hobby. And that's one of the beautiful things about this hobby is whenever you first start with it, you can absolutely get relatively easy going, even on Android. Not as easy as on a Linux device, mind you, absolutely not. But it's still not horrible. It's just you can't be afraid of the technology. You have to be willing to play and tinker. So with that said, it's not difficult if you're comfortable tinkering, but it's not for everyone. And I'll have to give it a slightly above average 45 out of 69. And if you're willing to tackle that learning curve, it leads me perfect into my favorite category, customizability. So I was curious. This device just came out. So I jumped onto one of my favorite sites, Etsy, and they already do have grips that you can get for this. The cool thing about the grip is it's a case that, adds a little bit of width to it, makes it feel more like a controller, but then you can take it off and slide it on the front and protect your device as if it's protecting your screen when you're not using it. So great little flexibility that those cases generally offer, and you should see it on the screen right now. Now you can also get buttons for this. Now I know that it's not specifically mentioning this, but these are the exact same buttons as what are on the RG477M. That's why Anbernic was able to release this so quickly. They didn't try creating new buttons. So, for example, my buddies over at Sakura will have the buttons for PlayStation on here. So you can customize, take off the back panel, put on PlayStation buttons if you prefer. And you can choose black or white, silver, give it some personality. I'm glad that they give us that option. You get some great flexibility in that way. The sticks that come with this are low profile, but they are using the same posts that your stick connects to that AYN uses, that Retroid uses, and even Ayenio have used on some of their devices. What that means is, again, people at Sakura and other stick modders on Etsy are able to give you custom sticks and custom grips to give it. So I went from a low profile to a medium stick in just about a minute to be able to do it. Now, Sakura, one of the nice things, and also can be frustrating if you're new to them, is that their sticks are really tight fitting on here. It's great that you don't have to worry about it slipping off, as I can tell you the AYN actual stick slides off my AYN Odin 2 portal occasionally if I'm playing a game of football or something, because I get a little into it. This one doesn't. Fits nice and snugly. But that also means you have to get it just right and push it down onto the stick pretty hard. So you might feel like you're going to break it, but don't worry, you're not going to break it. It's going to be kind of nerve-wracking that first time that you do it. Now, I can't see any officially supported screen protectors for this, but again, it is the same screen as the 477M, which that means that any screen protector that they have available for that, which there are some, you'd be able to use for this as well. Full stop, absolutely. So again, that's the external customizability. What about the internal customizability? Well, of course, again, as I mentioned, you have Android. So you can choose any number of, there's at least 10 front ends that you could choose. And if you're not familiar with the front end, it's kind of the user interface, the part that you see, the nice sparkly bit that you see when you're going through your games to select your games. So Anbernic has their own. With this Anbernic button, you can launch and close it. Then you have, of course, you have my favorite ESDE, you have Beacon, you have Daijisho, and others that are able to give you that nice front end look that customizes to your personality. The nice thing about ESDE is they have a bunch of themes that can completely change how it looks. And I showed that during my last live stream. So if you're interested in that, check out the live stream from Wednesday. It's about 2 hours long, I understand, but I do go over kind of the nitty gritty of the ESD experience. The reason I like to do that during my live streams rather than during these videos is I like to focus on the review for this. But I like to be able to go wherever the wind blows me for those live streams. So I had people suggesting games. So I went and played games, whether it was suggesting a specific console, such as trying Wii, or trying specific games that were requested. And if you would like a game featured on a live stream, feel free to either join the live stream itself or during the unboxing video, comment in the comment section of that video saying what game and on what console you would like. For example, Metal Gear Solid on GameCube. Then I'll make sure that I have that on the device for my live stream. So whether you watch it live as I make it or you watch it later, you can have the game that you called out. And I want to have a good selection of games. So please be there for me and give me some good games that you want to see on various consoles. I don't care if it's SNES, it's PS2, PS3. If the console can handle it, I'll play it. Now, bear in mind, there are many handhelds that can't play PS3 games. So if you ask for a PS3 game, obviously it's going to be limited to future consoles that can handle PS3. But for those that will play PS3, I'll play it. Same thing. This has Wii, so I played some Wii games. Okay, fair enough? Cool. So that said, it has great software and it's growing hardware support, but it's missing some key items that would really make it be the best of the best. So I have to give it still a well above average 63 out of 69. But all the customization is pointless if the core controls aren't that good. So let's talk about controls next. Now, as I mentioned earlier, this D-pad is an SNES style D-pad, which means that it has great controls as far as no accidental diagonals. But when you want to do a diagonal, it absolutely gives you that diagonal. And it's a good size and it's not clicky. I love that it's not clicky. I don't want my D-pad click, 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 click every time I'm pressing it. But that's, again, my preference. I know a guy at my church told me that he loves having clicky buttons because he is someone that uses a mechanical keyboard. So if you're the type that loves a mechanical keyboard because you love those clicks, maybe this is too quiet for you. It's possible. But that's the beautiful part of this hobby, is there's a console for everybody at every size, at every price point. If you only have $20 to spend, I can recommend a device that would be okay. Won't be spectacular by any means, but you want some SNES games, you want some Nintendo, you want some Game Boy games, absolutely. 20 bucks and you're set. You step it up to another $15 to $35, then we can get up to PS1 and some PSP games, right? So it's every price point depending on what you want. If you want a Game Boy clone, absolutely. If you want one of these horizontal handhelds, absolutely. That's the great thing about it. Now we're getting clamshell, both small clamshell like the Nintendo Game Boy Advance SP, and now we're getting the dual screen ones that are able to handle both. Whether it's native dual screen or like last week's Retroid Pocket 5 that became its own secondary screen, we're getting these options, and I can't be happier that we're having those options because this is kind of the golden age to be a fan of retro games. Now, as I mentioned, it comes with low profile sticks, which is fine, makes it very pocketable. I added mid profile, so they're a little bit longer. As you can see here, they're a little bit longer than what came with the box. And then I added these stick grips to give it kind of that rubbery PlayStation analog stick vibe, which really vibes with me well. These buttons are a little clicky, but still relatively quiet compared to a lot of handhelds I've tested this year. The face buttons are also relatively quiet, unless you're trying to mash it as hard as you can. Again, most people will play this and be able to play next to somebody late at night, and you're not going to wake them up unless you're pressing R1 and L1. Pressing those, these are the clickiest buttons on the device, so make sure you're not being too harsh on them. The triggers are thankfully nice and quiet. So without a doubt, this handheld has one of my favorite set of controls of the year, so I'll have to give it a 60 out of 69. We've covered the feel and the functionality, but the final question is always about value. So let's break it down next. So as I mentioned, this has an absolutely stellar 4:3 aspect ratio screen. Better than almost any other 4:3 screen I can think of. Now, I haven't seen the 4:3 screen on the Aeneo Pocket DS, but whenever that does ship, probably in December for me because I have the 8 Elite version coming. But whenever that does ship, I'll be able to tell you. But for now, this is the best 4:3 aspect ratio screen I have. And let's be honest, PS2 and before were all part of the 4:3 generations. Sure, you could get some of those PS2 games and GameCube games to show on widescreen TVs as a widescreen format as an option, such as I believe Gran Turismo 4. But that said, the vast majority were still 4:3. So if that's what you're after, this is the way to go. No boxes on those 4:3 content. Now, if you're playing something like a Game Boy, you're going to get pillar boxes on the sides because they're holding them up like pillars. And you might get letterboxing on the top and bottom if you're trying to play PSP, for example, because PSP and PS3, even though you can't really play PS3, but PSP because it was 16:9 like your HD TV. So you're going to have those boxes on top and bottom. If you remember from the years that we had these TVs and then the DVDs started coming out, and they always had those bars on top and bottom, then they went away. And of course, then they made the image even wider to give us those letter boxes once again, right? So that's what happens. You get the letter boxes top and bottom if you're playing PSP, for example, or you're playing a supported game, PS2 game on widescreen format. And again, for $150, $160, you're getting some GameCube, some PS2, and even some lightweight Wii games. Whereas, sure, there are new competitors coming out. Absolutely. If you're budget conscious and you're looking at PSP and below, absolutely. The new just released yesterday, but again, I have to consider the value, and it depends on what your use case is. If you're looking for PSP and below, then you want something with widescreen potentially if you have a lot of PSP love in you, and you'll want to go with the just released Mongmi Air X. It has a 5.5-inch screen, which is the same size as this guy right here, but it's a lot less powerful, and it starts at $80 US right now. And sure, again, it's nowhere near as powerful as this. This is a lot more powerful. But how much of that are you going to be using? That really depends on you. If you're a big PSP fan, then I would say probably look at that. If you're sticking to 4x3 content, this is really great. However, Ayeneo is also today releasing the Ayeneo Pocket Air Mini, which has a 4.2-inch diagonal, 4.2-inch diagonal versus 4.7-inch. And it can do almost what this can do. It can do some PS2, some GameCube. It can't do the Wii, can't do all PS2. Granted, this can't either. This can't do all of GameCube, especially not without glitchiness. So I'm not saying this is perfect by any stretch of the imagination. But that said, the thing to keep in mind is that's only going to be about $80 as well. So sure, you get a little bit smaller screen, but you get a pretty capable device. Yes, it can play PSP, but of course you're going to have letterboxing for PSP. So they're basically the same. The Mongmi Air X and the Ayeneo Pocket Air Mini are both great devices. And they can do basically the same thing. Maybe the Ayeneo is a little bit more powerful, so you can get a little bit more PS2, a little bit more GameCube out of it. But the threshold is there where, again, it just depends on what you want for about $80, whereas for about double the price, you get relatively solid PS2 performance. Not spectacular, but relatively good. And you do get some Wii, even if it's basic Wii, whereas those devices, you don't get any Wii. So again, I probably wouldn't buy this for Wii, but it's just a nice added bonus. This will have the better screen. I am 99.9% confident, even though I haven't seen the screen on the other two devices. So if you're looking for screen quality as a paramount feature, this is the way to go. And also to point out, this has more internal storage. This has 128 gigabytes of internal storage. Those either, for example, the Mongmi has 64 gigabytes, and the Ayeneo either has 32 or 64 gigabytes of internal storage. So much less internal storage than this guy. And if you get a memory card for this, it's going to include the games. Whereas the other two, even if you buy a card from them, usually it won't include any games. So if you're new to the hobby and you don't currently have any ROMs, I'd say maybe this with a micro SD card is the way to go. So you can start to establish your ROM collection. Now, if you do have your big collection of games and you do have the tools to dump your ROMs, absolutely, that's the best way to go, is using the ROMs that you've dumped yourself because you know the quality of the ROM you're using. So again, it's a very good value for what you're getting because there's a lot of devices that are marginally more powerful, but are another $50, $60. And there are some that are equally as powerful for more expensive as well. But then again, there are some that are slightly less powerful that are half the price. But I still think it's a good value for what you're getting, considering a few years ago, a device this powerful would have been $300 or $400. So all that, I have to give it a 53 out of 69 for the value. So with all of the individual scores tallied, where does it leave us? Well, let's put it all together for the final verdict. With the first category being the unboxing experience, it provides a basic but functional experience, but it's nothing special, so I gave it a 39. Internals, it's capable and well-rounded as far as spec sheets go for a mid-range emulation, so I gave it a 51. As far as first impressions go, it feels premium with a stunning screen, let down only by the loud L1 and R1 buttons, so I gave it a 57. As for ease of use goes, it's familiar thanks to its Android OS implementation, but it's hampered by the need of significant tinkering to get the most out of it. So I gave it a 45. For customizability, you get strong aftermarket support and software support, minus a few key items yet, but again, that's because it's brand new, so I'll give it a 63. The controls are excellent for daily use and top tier D-pad and face buttons, despite the clicky L1 and R1. So again, I'm giving the controls a 60. And as far as value goes, it's a premium package that's getting harder to justify against the newer, cheaper rivals from the Aeneo Pocket Air Mini and the Mongmi Air X, but it's still more powerful than the average handheld in the $150 to $160 range, so I'll give it a 53. And averaging that out to the nearest whole number gives us a final score of 53 out of 69. This is a device of brilliant highs, like its excellent screen and controls, balanced out by significant lows, like an out-of-box experience that is suboptimal at this price point and tough new competition. That said, what are the top pros of this device? Well, as I've mentioned, the stunning 4:3 aspect ratio screen. This screen has a high refresh rate and excellent visual quality sharpness, so it's simply one of the best for retro gaming, period. The premium build quality and controls. It feels great in the hand. It doesn't feel like a cheap toy. And the D-pad and face buttons are top-notch quiet, and they are truly Anbernic quality in the best way possible, so thank you, Anbernic. The SoC gives you a strong performance foundation thanks to the T820 with 8 gigabytes of RAM, make Android and emulators in general run fairly smoothly. And great customization potential. Between Android software and Etsy hardware, you can really truly make it your own. What about the top cons? Well, as I mentioned, this is not a plug-and-play device. The out-of-box experience requires significant setup and tinkering to get things running smoothly, whereas a Linux device, you turn it on, you're playing in a minute. The L1 and R1 buttons are noticeably loud and break the otherwise premium feel and quietness of the device itself. For me, the lack of ergonomic grips built into the device. Yes, sure, the back is sleek, but it can become uncomfortable during long playing sessions, which is why I wish we had the ergonomic grips. And it's a tough value proposition. With the new rivals around $100, its premium price is harder to justify on performance alone. That said, who should consider it? The display purist. The display purist is someone who prioritizes pixel-perfect, gorgeous integer scaling on a fantastic screen, then absolutely consider this. Or if you are an Android aficionado. By that I mean you're somebody who enjoys the customizing aspect of an Android device and isn't afraid to do the initial setup that could take a couple of hours to really make it your own. So who should skip it? I would say the first-time emulator, i.e., those that are looking for a simple plug-and-play experience right out of the box because they haven't played retro games in a while and they just want to relive those memories. And the budget-minded gamer. And that's somebody that wants to play some PS2 games and some GameCube games, but is okay with having a smaller catalog of games to play from in those generations if that means a much cheaper price. So back to the opening question. Does having one of the best screens on the market justify the price of admission? For the right person, absolutely. If you're a display snob who values crisp images and great controls above all else, and you're willing to overlook the setup time and the price, you could have found your next handheld. But if you just want to play games and don't care about the pixels, the answer is probably not. That said, I make these videos for you. So if this review helped you, please hit the like button, subscribe for more videos, and let me know what you think of the RG476H. And until next time, this has been P. Nick.